Good evening, everyone. I'm Kurt Dietrich, Superintendent of Schools. It's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to our North Penn School District Community Forum. I appreciate the interest shown by those who are in attendance this evening. We will have an opportunity to interact with you during the course of the evening. We also appreciate the opportunity to interact with those who are watching at home on North Penn Television. We are participating with coveritlive.com. So if you're watching this in North Penn Television and you'd like to log on to coveritlive.com, you have the opportunity to send send questions through coveritlive.com, and those questions can be fed to me then. This will also be rebroadcast on our community cable television. So perhaps you're seeing a copy of this later in the week or within the next week or two of tonight's program. For those who are watching it later, there is an opportunity then to log on our website and to give us feedback via the website. We will have an opportunity for those who are participating this evening to work through our polling process, but if you are watching this on a tape delay basis, it's very likely by that point in time the polling process will be shut down. However, you will have the opportunity to log on to the website and to take the survey in that manner. I do want to give a quick recap of last night's school board meeting. We did have a work session with the school board last evening, and we did provide an update to the school board on the status of our budget. We have some good news and we have some not so good news. And I will start with the good news first. We are seeing a slight uptick in some of our local revenues, and at the April Finance Committee meeting of the school board, we will make a determination if we can go ahead and budget a slight increase in some of those local revenues. For example, our earned income tax and our real estate transfer tax. Both are seeing some signs of recovery, and we will, if we get the go-ahead from our Finance Committee, build in approximately $400,000 additional revenue on the revenue side of the equation. We're also getting some good news on the self-funding of our health care. You recall that North Penn transitioned to self-funding health care this year for the first time, and our first-year experience has been very good. Now that's helping us in a couple of ways. First of all, it appears as though we will be able to hold our health care cost increase for budget purposes to a 0% for the medical surgical and a 4.8% increase for the prescription. So that'll have a savings of approximately $400,000 there from that change in the budget line item for health care. We also are seeing through our first year of savings and some great results in our experience for this first year, likely the ability then to be able to put some money into a fund for rate stabilization. Because when you're self-funded, you have the individuals who do the underwriting estimate what your costs are going to be, and then we go to a reinsurance company where we buy stop-loss insurance. So in our case, we buy it at 125% of expected claims. Now, when you're doing that, you have a quarter there between your expected claims and the 125% figure when stop-loss would kick in. In that quarter, you are responsible for all your costs. So it is best practice to be able to have a fund available for the years when you don't have such good experience. And we look as though we're going to be able to have some money to be able to put into a fund to do that so we can continue this process of being self-funded for health care. So that's all really good news on that side of the equation. On the not so good news, we were participating in a transportation consortium, and we were working with some other school districts that border us or near us. However, that consortium is no longer expected to be in place for this coming year. So that means that we'll have to rebuild the routes for the non-public school busing. And I look forward to having participation of those parents and those schools in rebuilding those routes. We also will ask for some feedback this evening on transportation because that is one area where we've targeted and we'd like to be able to economize and to help meet some of the budget gap. So you'll have an opportunity to give us some feedback on that this evening also. The way we're going to do this is we'll walk you through some slides to give you some context, and then we'll talk about some of the issues, and then you'll have the opportunity to text your vote. And I'll have Kyle Berger, who is one of our teachers, help a little bit educate the group this evening on how this texting process works. And then we'll go ahead and we'll answer some questions via the text process. We also know that those individuals watching on television can do the same thing. And then, as I said earlier, you'll have the opportunity also to vote on an online survey if you're watching this on the rebroadcast. Just in terms of what we've used here, and some of these are one-time options, that makes it more difficult than in the future to be able to balance the budget because it's a one-time option. We did reduce our budgetary reserve by $3 million in the 10-11 year. We're expecting in the 12-13 year we can reduce our budgetary reserve another $500,000. The budgetary reserve is a one line in the budget that covers then any other line items within the budget where you don't exactly hit the mark. We have many, many line items in the budget, and sometimes it's very difficult to be absolutely precise. For example, we budget for the cost of diesel fuel for our buses. It's extremely difficult to be exactly precise in projecting the cost of diesel fuel. So rather than building too much caution in each of those line items, we have one line item where we have the ability then to transfer, and the school board is the only group that can do that transferring. They can transfer money out of budgetary reserve into that specific line item. But based on some past experiences here, we feel comfortable being able to reduce budgetary reserve by another $500,000. So that has some potential to also help us on the revenue side for this coming year. However, that makes it more difficult then to be able to use that again in future years. So this is basically a one-time or perhaps twice a budget option for us. We did expand bidding in the 2011-2012 school year, which saved us $300,000. It's very difficult to be able to expect additional savings through the expansion of bidding. We did reduce our instructional allocations to 75%. That would be the allocations that go to each of the buildings and purchases various supplies, replacement textbooks, those sorts of things at the school level. Well, that was reduced in 11-12, and we're maintaining it at that level. Eventually, we may have to increase that figure, though, because it's difficult to continue to operate on that kind of an allocation year after year after year. Energy management is an area we've targeted. We've done very well with that. In the 11-12, we set a target of $500,000. In the 12-13 school year, and we're meeting that target of $500,000. In the 12-13 school year, we're setting a target of $715,000, and we're doing really well with energy. So I'm proud of the efforts of all the individuals involved with that. However, there is a limit. Eventually, you cannot continue to expect to become even more efficient with your use of energy. The transportation I mentioned earlier there, $1.2 million in the consortium and $400,000 in the district. We are now losing that consortium, so we need to be prepared to rebuild those routes. Refinancing the debt, we've done that in the 11-12 year. There really are no options right now to do any kind of refinancing on the debt, no ability to call back any bonds at this point in time. The unfilled vacancies, a major strategy that we have used in the school district, $5.4 million worth of savings in 11-12. We are expecting again for 12-13 to have to live with additional vacancies. We are projecting 10 retirements from our teaching staff. There'll be tremendous pressure on us not to replace those individuals. We will likely be reviewing the certifications of all of our teachers. There might be some areas where we have a few teachers that aren't needed because of declining enrollments or changes in the requests that students are making at the secondary levels, and then some of those individuals would be approached to teach in an area where they also have a second certification. But nonetheless, we are expecting to live with additional vacancies in 12-13. However, as you extrapolate that on out, it's difficult to be able to continue that strategy. Drawing down the PSERS reserve, we do have a reserve that we've built up to help cushion some of the rate spikes in the Pennsylvania school employees retirement system. There were some years there when we knew the spikes were coming, and we were able to put some money aside for that. Eventually, we expect to have to start to draw that down. We have approximately $5.8 million in that reserve fund to draw down. The Access Medicaid revenue, we've put on a concerted effort to be able to increase Access Medicaid revenue, and we are seeing an uptick in that. And for 12-13, we're expecting $400,000 additional in Access Medicaid. That is for medically related services that are necessary for special education children. We get a reimbursement from the state, which is pass-through money from the federal government for those services. Controlling healthcare costs, as I mentioned earlier, we've been doing real well with the self-funding, and we're seeing a reduction there with what is necessary to be able to cover that. However, again, those costs nationally continue to increase. They continue to increase in Pennsylvania, and we need to continue to be very aggressive in trying to control our healthcare costs. That does require the full cooperation and participation of all of our stakeholders, all of our employees there to be able to control healthcare costs. A key strategy for that is to be able to have a very robust wellness program and a really good disease management program for those who already have chronic illness. The food service department did take over paying for aides salaries, aides that are in the cafeterias helping students, and that had a savings of $400,000 in 2011-12. The PSERS rate stabilization, we had been adding to that. We're no longer doing that now. Postponing the modernization of our Inglewood Elementary School was done for 11-12, and that had a savings. User fees at the high school, that being parking and others, $50,000 for 11-12. There is potential there for more if the determination is made that we should increase user fees. We did have line item reductions in 11-12 of $1.5 million, and for 12-13 we're projecting about $2 million. Let me quickly update you on that. I did update the school board last evening. There was a list of items that we initially started out for a worst case scenario. That list was in excess of $7 million to be prepared if that worst case scenario occurred. Already back about a month ago, we were able to determine when we saw the governor's budget, we did not need to have cuts of that degree. So we pared that list down to approximately $2.5 million. We've done some additional paring on that list now, and that list stands presently at approximately $2 million. There are a few items that we did remove from the list for present consideration for this present budget cycle, that being next year's budget. That includes the reduction in the strings lessons from twice a week to once a week. That's no longer under active consideration. Likewise, for this coming year, we have removed from that list, removing a middle school librarians and also reducing the phys ed requirements for 12th graders. Likewise, from that list, we removed the purchase of some science textbooks. We do need to purchase those books, so that's no longer on the cut list. And the final thing that's been stricken from that list is the addition of another program at the Northbridge Alternative School. We do not have the capacity to be able to put that program in place for this coming year. Now, all of that said, it needs to be very well understood that those things were stricken from the cut list for this coming year's budget. That doesn't mean that those won't return again in another year. This problem is a structural problem. It's a challenge facing us, and that's part of the reason we're here tonight to talk about alternative revenue. It's not getting any easier, and we'll show you a few slides in just a few moments to show you the difficulty of the challenge. So I just want to be clear about that. Those things are not under active consideration at this time for this coming school year's budget, but that doesn't mean that they won't be considered again then in another year when we're back into another situation having to find places to be able to reduce the budget. Okay, we also had an employee challenge to reduce budget within the present year in 2010-11. That had a savings of $1.5 million. There's some changes in the grant funding, and that had a $489,000 contribution for the budget. The reverse assessment appeals, we are challenging some of the assessments for properties that are of commercial nature that we believe are underassessed. There are some properties within our school district, and that sector of the economy is doing really well. And we believe, based on our analyses and working with a company that does this kind of a work, that those properties are underassessed. So we are initiating challenges in those properties. Now, we also have properties where the owners of the properties are the ones initiating the challenge. And that has had an impact on our budget in the opposite direction. So it cuts both ways, and we are looking at the properties that we believe might be underassessed, just as we're being told by owners in some cases that their properties are overassessed. We had a 6-month salary freeze for our staff, our support staff and our administrative staff. That had a savings for us. There will be another 6-month salary freeze, so the agreement there was to go 18-month intervals for their increases, and that has savings to the budget. Bob Schock is our Director of Business Administration. I'd like Bob to take the next 2 slides. Bob?
Yes, thank you, Kurt. What you see here is about a 27-year history of the Public School Employees Retirement System funding. In blue and red, you see the 50% share by the school district and the state. And on the far left side, those numbers totaled 20% for the first 6 years shown. Then in the 1990s, with very strong interest earnings, those dropped from a combined 20% to the employer and the state, dropped down to less than 1%. Now, during that period, the employee share went from 5% up to 7.5%, as you see that increase in 2003. Now, in 2000, at the middle of the chart, the state retirement system for school employees was 120% funded. Given the recession and some other losses in the 2001 time period, with a short recession at that point and the long recession at the end of the decade, it's necessary to refund that system back to full funding. So you have a 27-year picture here. Now the next picture shows you what we face. The 27 years that I showed you on the previous chart is shown on the left half, and what we face between now and 2045 is a very extensive increase, up to in excess of 20%. We would actually be at about 28% going out of 6 years from now. So that is what's called the rate spike, and I think it's very clear that we're going to have a very difficult period, not only the school districts, but also the state in making its contribution on behalf of the school employees. That is one of the major challenges we face, and what we can also determine from that is that the state will find it very difficult to increase funding by the 2% levels that would normally bring in $500,000 to $600,000 increases year after year.
Just want to expand on one thing Bob was explaining there in terms of those rates. In that trough there, in the years when the rates are at its lowest points, those are rates that the state, all of those rates on there, the rates that the state sets. It's not that the district chose to fund that pension at a different rate in those years. The state tells us how much we shall send to them to cover the pension costs. So during those years when there was a decline in the percentage of the payroll that we needed to send to the state, that was based on the state's own calculation of what kind of dollars they would need from the local school districts. It's not like the district decided in those years not to send money in or something. We send what we're told to send. Now, there were a few years, as I indicated earlier, where despite the fact that the increases were starting to occur, we actually budgeted additional money then for that rate stabilization. And that's where the $5.8 million comes from. So in those last few years after I think it was 2008 when the market really hit that retrenchment and was down to around 7,000 maybe at that point in time, and the state lost a lot of their investments. After that, when they redid the numbers and you saw that these increases were coming, we started to put some money aside to be able to use when you get to those really high figures. But it's not nearly enough. It's not nearly enough. 5.8 million gets used up pretty quickly. We're talking about some large numbers here. Our payroll is about 110 million for easy calculations. So when you look at 110 million and you see that those rates are going up to 12.65 and then up to 16 point something and up to 20% and then up eventually to 28%. And you're looking at 110 million, which is going to grow a little bit also, I'm sure. You can see that's a substantial amount of money that's necessary to fund the pension system.
When we look at the three components of compensation 10 years into the future, the blue at the bottom, which represents about $3 to $4 million as you go to the right 10 years into the future, that would be a 3% salary increase. The red would represent a 10% increase to the current health care rates, and that's been the kind of increase that's been going on at a national level for the past decade. The green at the top represents the increase in those school retirement rates for the school district. You'll see a purple line well over to the right. That represents the excise tax on the high-cost healthcare programs that our employees would be judged to be high cost in 2018. So what you see there is just at the time we're getting some relief from the rate spike of the retirement system, we would be hit by that as long as that healthcare excise tax is still in place. Now, the question we're asking with this chart is, if we have a significant economic rebound, which is shown by that red line, which represents $500,000 in additional money every year, what kind of a tax increase would be necessary to fund these three components of employee compensation? And if we were to have a 3% tax increase, we would be at a $5 million level, each percent worth $1.5 million. 3 times that, $4.5 million, to add to the economic rebound of $500,000. We would only be able to fund half of the amount of this increase. That's why we call it a structural deficit. These components are in place. We have very little control over several of those components. So that shows you what would happen with a 10% increase. Now, as I change the slide, just watch how these numbers change if healthcare in red is 3%. So this shows if we can have a very aggressive cost control program, as Dr. Dietrich described earlier, it's then possible, with a 3% tax increase, to bring in $5 million and have somewhat manageable budget reductions to face in the next 4 years and going into the future. So 3% is just a little above the average increase of the past decade.
So those are some big questions. Does the community support tax increases of that degree? That's a big question that our community is faced with right now. Are there any other sources to be able to bring in revenues? If we don't, first of all, can't solve the problem simply through tax increases. Second of all, we're not even certain of, what percentage increases in taxes the community is willing to give towards schools. Can we close this gap through some alternative revenue sources? Because that's another way that you can help to narrow that gap. But you can see the magnitude of this. You can see the impact in healthcare costs. You need to know, though, that healthcare costs generally are still increasing at around 8 to 10%. So the fees that doctors and hospitals are charging, and it's complicated. You have all the other issues that we're faced with in healthcare right now. Those fees are generally increasing at around 8 to 10%. So we really need to be able to have some cost containment through better wellness programs and better disease management programs to be able to do that. The other big question, of course, is where is the federal health care going, the Patient Protection Care Act. As you know, the Supreme Court is considering that right now. But as Bob said earlier, that excise tax is set to go into place in 2018. And the trajectory that we are on would subject our school district to that excise tax. The excise tax is 40% tax above a certain amount of money in terms of what your plan is valued at. And we are on a trajectory that would make us subjected to that excise tax. So depending where that's headed, that can have a big impact on us also. Okay, this will give you a little preview of what we're going to do here in terms of text voting. Before I do that, though, this is just a little silly way to try out the system. But before we do that, I do want to have an opportunity to field any questions you might have about what you've seen so far in terms of the challenge in front of us. Are there questions at this juncture that I may try to answer regarding the challenge that's in front of us budgetarily? I see a hand over here.
I understand the district is considering joining a healthcare consortium to share costs with other school districts. Where do they stand on that?
Thank you for that question. There are some options available to school districts. There's an interest in joining consortia or having districts join together and forming consortia. There already is one consortium that's operating within Montgomery County. We do participate with that consortium to help control our costs for the prescription. We are on our own regarding doing the medical surgical for this year for the first time. We formerly were in that consortium also for the medical surgical. There's another option now available to the district, and that's the Bucks Montgomery County group that we're taking a look at also, and we're studying that really closely there also. That one's a little bit different. That one is modeled more after the Taft-Hartley Act. That one would have a 50% management, 50% union control on the board of directors of that particular consortium. So that's another option that we're studying very closely. As I said earlier, there are some districts that already have committed to each of those consortia or consortiums, so we'll continue to study that. But right now we are self-funded and we're not in a consortium in terms of sharing in any of those kinds of initiatives at all. The big challenge for us is to have a very strong wellness and disease management program, and we do need the full cooperation of everyone. There's an advantage to working with other school districts also to be able to develop that disease management and wellness program too. So no matter if we participate or not, we do need to have the full participation of our employees, and likewise we need to work with our neighboring districts on those concepts. So thank you very much for that question. Great question.
I would like to know about the ramifications of the declining number of people that are paying taxes due to the earned income tax because they are all retiring. 1946 relates to 300,000 people a month retiring. They are no longer paying Berkheimer. They will probably stay in their house. There'll be no transfers. How will that overlay into this budget?
It's a great question. The baby boomers and the impending retirement, or some already retiring from the baby boomer generation. Big challenge for public school districts, a big challenge for other municipal governments, a big challenge for our state and federal government. As those individuals are retiring, we're not going to have that income then from the earned income tax. So I don't have precise figures for you on that one, Bill, but that's a great point, and it's something we need to be very, very well aware of as we look ahead into the future. We also know when you have that baby boomer generation and the expected life expectancy that we're seeing, which is wonderful that that's increasing, that also keeps people on Social Security longer. It also keeps individuals then on the health care longer. It also then has an impact on the state employees' retirement system, because we have a system in Pennsylvania where you have your retirement calculated at the time of retirement, and you get that as long as you live then. It's not a defined contribution plan, it's a defined benefit plan. So you continue to get that benefit. So that's a big challenge for us. See a hand over here?
In regards to the healthcare consortium, where does the district stand with the RFP that was filed in 2011, which Upper Dublin now has accepted, Quakertown, Central Bucks? North Penn was in on that RFP.
Yeah, North Penn, we did put money into the study of that. The $7,500 was contributed from the school district. $2,500 was contributed by the Teachers Association into that study of that. There has been no decision made on whether or not we're going to officially join that. There is a possibility that it wouldn't be joined for this year, but that we may join then in a future year. But that decision has not yet been made. But that window time is closing now, and the opportunity for that will soon be gone in terms of joining for this coming year, but it doesn't preclude the opportunity to join that one then in a future year. But if the decision is made not to join, or no decision is made to join within the next week or so, I think that it's unlikely that we would be joining for this coming year, but it doesn't shut down the opportunity to join in future years. But that's the very latest on that. I think there are around 8,000 or 8,500 employees from those various districts that were mentioned, in some other districts, a total of 8,500 employees right now. We have about 1,800 employees in North Penn that receive medical benefits. So there is interest in having a district our size join that consortium. There's the other consortium I mentioned, also the one we're participating in on a prescription. They'd also like to have us join their consortium for working together with them also. So we're still examining all those possibilities. Any other questions? We have something from Cover It Live?
Kurt, our first question comes from Kathy online, and it says, if North Penn did not self-fund health care, how much more would need to be budgeted?
Okay, it's a great question. If North Penn did not self-fund health care, how much more would need to be budgeted? Off the top of my head, I think that we're able to reduce our budget line item for this coming year in health care by around $540,000, if my memory is correct, because we are self-funded. So in order to keep that to a 0% increase in the medical surgical, which is not what is happening within the industry, healthcare costs are going up approximately 8%. So that has an immediate benefit right there. Had we not even done that, it would be even higher. So it was a great decision that we made to go to self-funded. But please understand, when you go to self-funded, you're taking on some of the risk. That's the way it works. When you're fully funded, you just call up Blue Cross and you say, Blue Cross, how much will it cost us to have all of our employees who are eligible for medical care covered with the following list of benefits, and we don't want any risk. We want you to tell us and to look at this thing and do it prospectively and say, how much will it cost us to have it covered? And they give you a figure. That's fully funding it. We're self-funding it now. So the way it works now is we estimate what our expenses are going to be. When the person actually goes to the doctor, they present a Blue Cross card, and the Blue Cross has does the third-party administration, so they handle everything through the doctors and the hospitals, and then they just send us the bill each month. And then we reinsure ourselves in the event that something really goes awry. We reinsure for any catastrophic claims on the individual nature. Anything over $300,000, we're reinsured on that. So if there's an individual claim over $300,000, the stop loss kicks in. And in the aggregate, anything that's 125% of what we expect it'll be, they pick up at that point in time. So it has actually millions of dollars of savings for us by being self-insured. But we're at risk, and what I'm saying is we're intending to put additional money aside to be able to have money available in the event that we're coming in a year at, let's say, 105% or 110% of expected claims, because we have to pay those bills. We can't say we're out of money. We have to pay those bills. And that corridor between what's expected and when stop loss kicks in, 100% up to the 125%, that corridor we would be responsible for. But we're actually coming in under the 100% figure for this year. So that's the good news there. That's one of the reasons we're going to have some money available to put into that fund.
One more from online here, from Donna. If legislators pass Bill 1776 eliminating property taxes, what impact would that have, since our local school board members would be at the mercy of the state for all funding?
Actually, I'm not familiar with that precise bill. I'm familiar with some of the bills that are out there in terms of property tax. There are various versions of the bills dealing with property tax that are out there. One version would be to expand the homestead exclusion. Right now, you get a homestead exclusion where you see a small deduction in your property taxes due to the state gambling money. So if you look really closely at your bill, it'll show your bill would supposed to be so much, but then minus $150 or whatever it is because of the state gambling money. So we're already getting a slight advantage there from that homestead exclusion. So there is a bill that would expand that. It sounds like there may be another bill that would totally remove property taxes. That would be a big deal because if you want to transition to a sales tax or to a earned income tax, or to have the state increase the state tax, the income tax that the state levies, that could be a big deal for us. I think, Bob, where are we at now? $150 million right now of our roughly $200 million comes from the property tax. And approximately 30 million, and just for rough figures, we'll say 30 million right now comes from the state. So you can see, the magnitude of that. Approximately 30 million right now from the state, 150 million from the property tax. So depending on which bill you're talking about, that transition could be really significant. Personally, I don't see the state taking over that level of responsibility to have $150 million that we're getting from a property tax suddenly now come from the state. I just don't see them doing that. But there are all these different versions that are out there. There's some that call for increasing the sales tax. There are others that call for increasing the state income tax. Lots of different versions. We've been talking about property tax reform for many, many years, and it's a very unpopular tax. The other factor in this is that businesses and industrial commercial properties pay a lot of property tax. We have some large ones in our district. We have some medium-sized ones. We have some small ones in our district. They also pay a lot of property tax. So if you would totally abolish a property tax and put it all on a income tax, you'd have to be making up a large sum of money there that's paid by businesses. That $150 million is not all just from, taxes on homes. A good portion of that is from taxes on commercial properties. Okay, thank you for those questions. Excellent questions. Also appreciate the questions from Cover It Live, those watching on North Penn Television. Okay, it looks like you already have some people here that are kind of trying this out, but I'm going to bring Kyle up here to demonstrate how it works to do this polling via the text method. So, Kyle?
Thank you, Dr. Dietrich. As it appears, most of you, or some of you, have at least figured out how to do this. This is a piece of technology that I like to use in my classroom. It's called Poll Everywhere. And what it allows us to do is get free and instant feedback from either our students or, in this case, from audience members. And we've asked kind of a silly question here, if you believe the Phillies will win the World Series this year. If you haven't figured out how to do this yet, the way this works, you're going to open up your phone and send a text message. The recipient of that text message is number 22333. So that's who you're sending it to. And then in the body of your text message, if you think that suddenly Ryan Howard and Chase Utley are going to appear, you can send 238159 as your text as a yes. If you don't think that's going to happen, 238165, which 60% of you have done. And you could kind of sense when Dr. Dietrich was talking earlier and the results were kind of popping up live on the screen, everybody would kind of look at that. So as in our forum here tonight, this is a great way to get instant feedback from our community members. And at the same token, it's a great way to get instant feedback or to check for understanding in a classroom environment. And this is just one way that we're trying to embrace 21st century technology here and get some feedback from our community members. So there are some folks here that are students of mine. Dan, you can raise your hand. Chris is well up in the front. So if you're having difficulty somehow with your texting, you can find these guys. And Ray Gerhardt is here as well. You can ask them, and they'll be more than happy to help you send that text message. Legal disclaimer, standard text messaging rates do apply. Thank you.
Yeah, no charge if you have a full text plan. We're not saying, will you donate $10 to the North Penn School District? Text yes to this number, That might be an alternative revenue source. I was at Penn State's Thon, and you had the opportunity to do that. That's a big fundraiser that they do. So you could, text a certain number, and it would charge, whatever, $10 or $20, something to my AT&T plan. So we are right now seeing that we have 35 people have voted so far on this, and it's coming in roughly 43% here are saying yes, the Phillies will win the World Series this year. And somebody else just voted for that now, so it's up to 44%. 56% are saying that somebody voted the other way now, so it keeps moving back and forth there. 37 people have voted so far on this particular question. So that's how it works. Does anybody need help? I just want to make sure everybody's clear on how to do this. You can do this also if you're watching through North Penn Television. If you're watching this on a tape delay rebroadcast, it's very likely by that point in time it will not be available to you, but you can vote on these questions on our website. You cannot vote multiple times. Can you do that for American Idol? I'm not sure if you can. I think you can, right? You cannot vote multiple times on this. I know that. It recognizes your phone, and it won't allow you to continue to vote multiple times on this. In terms of how long will we be open for each question, we'll kind of gauge once I get a sense from those that are present this evening that they've all voted. So I'll have to kind of monitor that as it goes on here, and then we'll move to the next question. It'll stay open a little while longer, though, thereafter. Okay, let's build a little context here and give you some of the background and the things we'd like to have you give us feedback on. This slide is in regard to advertising in the North Penn School District. We have been working with the Alternative Revenue Committee. We have members of that committee present this evening. And those members of the committee have been working very diligently to pursue the concept of raising revenue by allowing advertising inside our schools or outside our properties. Efforts in this area including a meeting that we had with the Pennsbury School District officials. We did visit their schools, and we have some slides we'll show you this evening of some of the ads that they have in the Pennsbury School District. They're expecting to raise $400,000 annually from advertising within their schools. The Alternative Revenue Committee is requesting proposals from advertising agencies that work with educational institutions, so that's underway right now, just to get a feel from them what it would look like. It doesn't mean that we're doing it, but it does give us an idea of what it would look like. And they also are looking at draft board policies that would be necessary if the determination was made that we were going to allow advertising. Now here's an example of advertising in the school. This says, explore new worlds, read a book. It's money that's available. I think it's through the National Ad Council. I think that's what that one little insignia is down there next to that one character. Those of you that have small children, you recognize these characters as being important to kids. And it says, explore new worlds, read a book. And this is in the hallway. This one happens to be at the Pennsbury School District in one of their elementary schools. And it's on the wall. It's affixed by some adhesive. It's very thin. It's not more than a few millimeters in thickness. And it just is basically adheres to the wall there in that particular elementary school. So it encourages reading. Here's another example. This one says unplug. It's sponsored by discovertheforest.org. And you can see the Ad Council insignia and the United States Forestry Service insignia down in the corner there. You see probably a student there with a game controller and saying, unplug and get out and enjoy nature. So obviously the National Forestry Service has money available, the National Ad Council has money available, and the company that Pennsbury is working with has engaged them then to develop this ad, and then the Pennsbury School District is being paid to have this ad in their school building. Here's another one that they have in Pennsbury School District. It says, eat right, exercise, respect yourself. In smaller print, you can see it's sponsored by the Pennsbury Racquet and Athletic Club. It does give their phone number, and actually gives you two phone numbers there for the fitness center, and I can't quite read the tennis center, I think it says there. And you see on the left there an insignia for Pennsbury Racquet and Athletic Club. Here's another ad. This one's on lockers in the one of the middle schools in the Pennsbury School District. It says, exercise 1 hour every day, and it gives you examples of stretching and running, biking, other sporting kinds of activities. It says, stay active. That one is sponsored. You can see down in the bottom corner there, it says, I think it's CS Express Trucking. That trucking company has sponsored this ad. If you look really carefully, you can see that down in the corner below stretching. But it's basically the message is to exercise 1 hour every day, and it's affixed to the lockers. Kyle, we have a little NBC 10 story here, and if you could get that up for us. We'll show you what NBC 10 did regarding Pennsbury's efforts. It's a very brief video. While Mr. Berger is getting it up, are there any questions at this juncture about what you've seen so far? I think it's, no, I thought I saw movement in the back somewhere. I thought, over there I see a hand.
A lot of the things that we saw there are almost not considered commercial ads. They're sending positive messages, but who decides what is appropriate advertising in the school?
The way that particular school district has structured it, all ads must be approved by a committee. In their particular district, the committee consists of the assistant superintendent, the superintendent, and the board president. Those individuals are on a committee that decide that. They've structured their policy to limit them to certain areas. They're not permitting certain types of advertising. They've been really narrow in their focus. They're saying they're interested in ads that promote health or safety or wellness, those kinds of things. We're going to have a couple questions later that can show you some of the degree of potential ads, and I'm going to be asking for feedback on that. For example, do you have a different opinion if it's exercise every day, stay healthy, versus if it says drink Gatorade after you're finished exercising? Because that's a specific product. That says drink Gatorade. It's the drink for you when you're finished exercising. So does that change your opinion? That's going to be one of the questions. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit there, but that's part of the part of that.
Whoever sponsors the ad might be questionable also.
Yeah, and that's another question too, in terms of who the sponsor of the ad is. Are there any concerns if the sponsor of the ad is? In that one example there, I think it was the local racket and fitness club, the tennis club there. Are you comfortable with that, or are you saying, well, you know what, I'll go with National Ad Council, but that's where I draw the line. I don't want to go beyond that. Or do you say, you know what, hey, the racket and fitness club, I mean, that's a good thing. They're all about healthiness, and I'm comfortable with that. So you'll have a chance to give us some of that feedback. But those are the kinds of questions that all of us are asking that we need to have community feedback on. We need to have that community feedback. Are you good to go here, Kyle?
This is NBC 10 News at 6.
Well, budget cuts force the Bucks County School District to find new and creative ways to raise money. You can now find advertisements lining the halls at Edgewood Elementary School. But they aren't for soda or video games. The Pennsbury School District says these ads by the company's school media promote education, nutrition, and school safety. Like many other districts, Pennsbury is dealing with cuts in state funding and property tax revenue. These ads are going to raise more than $400,000 for the district.
Initially, I was apprehensive. What were these ads going to look like? What messages would they be sending to students? And then as we began to receive information, we realized that there were going to be filters on what would be appropriate at the elementary level.
The school board says 10 more ads are due at Edgewood Elementary and at 15 other district schools.
From our partners at the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Okay, that's a little snippet there that NBC 10 did on Pennsbury. You can go on YouTube and watch that again, or you can click on this. We'll put this PowerPoint up on our website if you want to watch that a second time. Okay, so here's our first question. So pull out your cell phones if you have them. And the question is, do you support limited advertising in the school in general in order to offset declining revenues? Is everybody ready to vote, or are there any other questions before there's voting? This is a general question. We'll have some more specific questions in just a minute. But just generally, do you support limited advertising? So limited is a key word there. In the school in general in order to offset declining revenues. There may be some differences in your cell phones depending who your carrier is, how quick it is to register up here also. I know I tried it out on a couple different phones. There was some difference in depending who the carrier was.
receive through sales tax and income tax, the first year they can automatically get 50% or less, and the second year, and that way it can be just like the homestead, like the gambling money coming in.
Dr. Dietrich, we do have a question from coveritlive.com about the advertising. Comes from Erica online, and she asks, what is the time period that each advertisement would be posted?
That is a good question. By the agreement with school media, they've said that the advertisement would be posted a minimum of 3 months. They wrote that into the contract. Now, when we talked to the representatives from Pennsbury, they gave the opinion that it's likely that some of these ads would stay up longer than that. But they wrote it into the contract. The ad would stay up for 3 months. I'm sure that they have provisions in there in the event that it stays up to a certain length of time for the vendor to renew and to put down another. I think in the case of Pennsbury, each ad is approximately $1,800, according to my calculations. I don't have that directly from them. That's kind of, back of the napkin calculating that I did, based on the number of ads that they said they would permit in their school district. If my memory serves me correctly, they're willing to have 6 like the ones I showed you there in an elementary school, 12 like the ones I showed you in a middle school, and 20-something in their high school of the magnitude I showed you there. So 3 months is the answer on that, and perhaps there might be an opportunity to renew for another 3 months for another fee again. Okay, we're going to move along. Here we had 55 people voting on this, and you can see the results there. 96% of those who voted on this particular question said they would support limited advertising in the school in general in order to offset declining revenues. 4% are not in favor of that. Okay, now we're going to get a little more specific. This one says, would you support advertising placed in common areas of the school, such as in the cafeteria or hallways? That is similar to the ad to the right of the question. So this one's going to be to try to get towards, the question of, are you okay with it being in the cafeteria or the hallways? Are you okay with it if it's something similar to explore new worlds, read a good book, unplug, get out there and enjoy the forest, those types of ads that are like the National Ad Council kind of ads. Okay, it looks like this type of ad has widespread support. We actually are 100% of the folks that are voting at this particular time indicating their approval of an ad of this nature. And we'll move along. Now this one's a little different. This one is, and we're not saying we would do this, we're just saying if we wanted to do this, would you be okay with this? And this is, would you support advertising promoting a product placed in common areas of the school, such as the cafeteria hallways, that's similar to the ad to the right of the question? So would you support having an ad that promotes a particular product? And this one says, we kind of pulled this one out from somewhere. I had some help on this. Tired of being tired, fight fatigue and support the immune system, FRS, Lance Armstrong, 7-time Tour de France winner, FRS, healthy energy. Now this one supports a particular product.
Dr. Dietrich, another question online while this voting is taking place, asking if Pennsbury is a smaller school district than North Penn, and if so, could North Penn command potentially more money because of a larger target audience?
That's a great question. The question, would North Penn have the ability to have a greater amount of money? Could we dictate a greater price? All of that we'd have to work out with the vendors. We do have more schools than Pennsbury has, so that we'd have the potential there for more ads. So there is some potential there given the size of our school district. I'm not sure where the market is right now on these ads, and that could be negotiable. We're in a new area when we're in this area, but a great question. Okay, looks like most people have finished voting on this one. You can see there's a difference on this one. When it talks about a particular product, the support is at 34% as a yes and 66% as a no. Okay, this is just a little bit different here. This is the concept of halftime promotions. There is an idea out there in the advertising world where if you are willing to have a sponsor, for example, an idea that was given to us by a school district, they have the Prudential Half-Court Halftime Shot Contest, brought to you by Prudential. So in exchange for you saying Prudential, you are paid a fee by the advertiser. So it's a sponsor of a contest at halftime. Now, of course, this would require a lot of discussion with the sponsor. How many times do you say the sponsor's name? Do you say it at the beginning of the game? Hey, stay tuned because at halftime we will have the Prudential half-court shot, sponsored by Prudential. Or will you say it again at each time out? Will you say it at the end of each quarter? Will you only say it at halftime? That's it. You're saying it once, and that's the extent of it. These are the kinds of things that are out there. If you attended this year's state playoff game for football, you heard ads across the loudspeaker at Hershey Park Stadium. They said, after the game, make sure you go, I think it was Red Robin. Go to Red Robin after the game. Enjoy a good burger at Red Robin. See you at Red Robin after the game. I mean, they were doing those ads at Hershey Park Stadium at the state playoff game. So that's something that is occurring. And there's an interest in vendors to do those kinds of things. This one is a sponsor of a halftime promotion. So that's a concept. We'd like to have some feedback from you on that. Is that something you're interested in, those revenue dollars, or something you are not interested in? So the question is, would you support advertising via paid promotional announcements during sporting events, such as sponsored halftime announcements? Would you support advertising via paid promotional announcements during sporting events, such as a sponsored halftime announcements? Okay, looks like most of you here this evening have voted on this one, and on this particular one, for those that voted either here in the auditorium or watching it online, we have approximately 88% saying yes, they would support advertising via paid promotional announcements during sporting events, such as the sponsored halftime announcement example. 13% are not in favor of that. Next question deals with the district website, the calendar, publications. The question is, would you support placing advertising on the district website, in the calendar, or in other publications? And hopefully this is lumped together appropriately for you, but the question we have is, does the public support, as a way of raising revenue, having ads on our website, or having ads in the calendar? There are districts that do that. They have the school district calendar in the top corner. It may say, and the one that's coming to mind, TD Bank has an ad for one of our local school districts. In the top corner it says TD Bank. Or Temple University may have an ad, as I recall. So do you support advertising on the website, in our calendar, or other publications?
Dr. Dietrich, a question coming in from the Cover It Live website from Mike. Could ads on buses also be an option?
Okay. While we're doing this voting, let me cover the bus situation. Presently, Pennsylvania law does not permit ads on the outside of a bus. If it's a school bus, it cannot have an ad on the outside of a bus. It can if it's a SEPTA bus, like a public transit bus, but it cannot for a school bus. They do allow ads inside of a school bus. So you can have an ad on the back of a seat, you can have an ad in the front near where the driver is, you can have a radio playing that has ads in, every, in between songs. That is permitted, but on the outside of a school bus is not permitted right now in Pennsylvania. Okay, on the district website, the calendar, other publications, those that voted this evening, 82% say yes, they would support placing advertising on the website and the calendar, other publications. 18% saying no, they would not support that. These are examples of advertising athletic venues. You've often probably seen this at a minor league stadium or perhaps at a major league stadium, wherever it might be. Some of the various ballparks across our country. This one is regarding a law firm. Actually, this one I think has a naming right to it also. But they're banners that are up at athletic venues. Here's another one, Coldwell Banker, Burkhart Field. The name you trust, the agents you deserve, Coldwell Banker. So would you support advertising such as the business ads on stadium fences, on concession stands, on concessions in general, on scoreboards? How do you feel about that? The question is that an area of advertising you say yes to or an area of advertising you are opposed to? Okay, it looks like this one's coming in around 85%, 86% at the very moment. Do support ads that are business types of ads on stadium fences, concessions, scoreboards, that sort of thing. Okay, that's some of the advertising information we wanted to get feedback from you on. The next is in regard to fund development. And another area that we're looking at, the Alternative Revenue Committee is looking at fund development. We do have fundraising right now from our individual home and school associations, the booster clubs, various student clubs do that. The North Penn School District Educational Foundation has fundraising efforts. Now, you do have a university model where there's fundraising that goes to alumni development, planned giving, grants, naming rights. There are all sorts of other potential ideas in fund development. So we're looking for some feedback on fund development. Are there any questions on that before I get to the poll question on the concept of fund development? Kyle?
There's one leftover question as far as advertising in schools is concerned, and it comes from Jeff, who asks, would there be a limit as to a specific topic giving coverage? And what he asks is, would you allow more than one sports drink ad, for example, or would there be a limit to a specific genre of advertising?
Okay, great question. We'd have to develop all this as a part of our policy, so that would have ramifications. We could say, look, there's one limit, and only one, and that's it. You may have a vendor who's willing to pay more if they're the exclusive, or you may have a situation where, hey, we'll take any and all in that particular area. So these are things where you have to actually get involved and write some specific policy on. I think if this continues to be an avenue that the district pursues, we can use people like the individuals who are asking questions this evening, individuals who are present this evening, to help us with framing these potential policy issues. We're thinking of very many of these on our own, but sometimes there's some that come up from individuals who just, can be helpful to us. So if you have an interest in this, please continue to communicate with us so we can make sure that we do this well. So the question is, do you support the creation of a development position to coordinate district-wide fundraising events, such as concert series, capital campaigns, etc.? Would you support us having a development position to coordinate these district fundraising events? A capital campaign, reaching out and trying to raise money to be able to fund things in the school district.
Who would be responsible for maintaining the signage up on the boards?
Okay, great question. Who would be responsible for maintaining this? None of this comes without some effort, so there would have to be somebody that would be responsible for maintaining. For example, some of the ads that Pennsbury has up there, the maintenance individuals would, monitor this. They have it built into their contract that if there's a defacing of it or there's something that happens to it the first time that would happen, if they can't, figure out who did that defacing and hold them responsible, they get a replacement ad, no fee, if it becomes a problem. They have not had any problems so far. But if it becomes an ongoing problem, then, the district would be responsible for that. So they'd have to, find the perpetrator and deal with that. But they actually have had a good experience so far, they told us. But when you're looking at advertising, like you're looking at any of this, it takes time and effort. It's not just simply snap your fingers and everything falls into place. So it does take some time and effort to do that. I have a question over here.
Hi, when you say create a development position, does that mean hire a new person or assign responsibility to an existing person?
Okay, the question is hire somebody or assign it to an existing person. We're actually looking for the first year to see if we can find money from donors. The Educational Foundation has already promised that they could contribute towards this just to see if it's viable. So if we could come up, if somebody's willing to write a check tonight for $10,000 to put towards this, I'll accept it. It's payable to North Penn School District. So we'll take those checks tonight. We'll take them this week. We'll take them as soon as we can get them. But seriously, we're looking to see, can we find some individuals saying, you know what, I'm willing to give some money towards that to be able to see if this is viable or not. That's what we have in our mind right now. We don't have anybody who's really sitting around right now twiddling their thumbs and has nothing to do. People are very busy right now. We're living with a lot of vacancies right now. We're down over 100 people in the school district where we haven't filled positions. So the concept here was, can we find some money for the first year where it wouldn't come out of taxpayers' money to be able to take a look at this? Now, if that doesn't happen and we're unable to do that, then we'd have to make a decision. Make a decision to at least give it a try with somebody and shift some responsibilities, take some things away from them that they're presently doing to free them up to be able to do it and change priorities, or actually use district money to hire somebody. But the goal would be, if we could, the preference would be to find sufficient donations in year one to then invest in this position and give it a year's try to see what it does. Okay, on this one we have 65% saying yes, 35% saying no. This one is in regard to fund development. Would you support granting naming rights or sponsorship of the stadium, the auditoriums, classrooms, any other areas within the school? So a sponsorship, you have a relative who is somebody you like to honor, maybe no longer living, and you say, okay, I'll sponsor, some auditorium or, some other facility within the school district. the concept of naming rights. And again, this can be complicated. Are we talking about naming rights that, it's the Citizens Bank Park, or it's the, individual's name type of auditorium, for example? So the question is, do you support that kind of a thing? We'd have to get into the detail. I'm not sure if your answer is different, depending if it's sponsored by a bank or by a insurance company or by some other commercial enterprise versus by a name. Okay, we have 82% of the folks saying, you know what, I'd support naming rights, sponsorships, those sorts of things. 17% not in favor of that, so it's right now at about 83 to 17 on that one. This next one has to do with alumni. And if you are a North Penn High School graduate, would you donate funds as part of an alumni fundraising drive? So if you're a North Penn graduate and you're watching at home or you're here this evening, are you interested in this? That's an untapped area for school districts. It's a big thing for colleges. Universities and colleges, they put a lot of effort into this. School districts really haven't gotten into this area very much yet. So the question is, do you support that kind of a concept? If you are a grad, are you willing to give money towards an alumni fundraising drive?
Dr. Dietrich, we have a question online while the voting continues on this question, and it asks, if the position of that development director was created, how much is the district looking at as far as a cost for that employee?
We don't know for certain yet, but our estimate is it's probably going to be something like $50,000 probably to be able to have a position, because you have your salary expenses, you have your other benefit types of expenses. It would depend how you would structure the position. Perhaps something in that neighborhood. That's just a ballpark figure right now, to be able to have a position like that. Okay, we have 50% of those who are voting on this one who are grads, saying yeah, they'd give money towards an alumni fundraising drive. 43% saying no. Of course, the question is, if you have 57% willing to do that, are you still willing to direct the effort towards this, because you have the willing who are willing to donate money. This whole idea of discretionary income, if there are individuals who have discretionary income, they have the ability to support some things, are they willing to give some of that money towards the public school system? Okay, I'm going to transition now from advertising. Before I do that, I just want to ask if you have any other questions at all about advertising, because I want to get some feedback. We have a couple poll questions on transportation. Are there any other questions at this juncture on advertising?
You have one more online from Lisa. If we decide to go with ads in our schools, how long does it take to implement them once it could be approved?
Great question. How long does it take? In the Pennsbury's experience, we were down there the very early part of March. And I think they were anticipating getting their first check. At that point in time, they had, I believe, 16 ads that were up in the building. So it takes a while. It takes a while for the company to be able to contact vendors and see who's willing to have ads placed. Then they need to have the sign-making company actually make the sign and have the installer come out and install the sign. And then at that point in time is when the money starts to flow. So it's difficult to bank on a whole lot of money in the first year on something like that, because it takes a while. It's not like in September you'll have your first checks come. That's very unlikely that it would happen. You get your first checks already right away in September. Things like this take some time. Okay, let's talk about transportation here. The cost of student transportation is a concern nationwide. We're reading a lot about that in the news right now. Efforts are being made by our school district to reduce costs. We have saved ourselves quite a bit of money on transportation, yet we think there's still the need to be able to economize some more. We do know that the consortium is disbanding, so we're going to have to rebuild that system there for the non-public, but we'd like to have some feedback on both public and non-public transportation. We are looking at bus stop consolidation. We're looking at ride time, and we're looking at shuttling students to various points as a potential way to reduce costs. We're also looking at long-term the concept of sharing buses between public and private school students. And I'm told some of you may be individuals that were in the school system during those years. Apparently there were times, if you go back, when for example, Lansdale Catholic students were on the same buses as I see some people shaking their heads that yes, that was a thing that was in place here in North Penn some time ago. So, as you can imagine, we have a large school district, a large geographic area that we need to cover. We have 53 buses, if I recall correctly, leaving the high school each afternoon. So 53 in the morning going out picking up students for the public schools. Then we also have quite a few buses for Christopher Dock. We have quite a few buses for Lansdale Catholic. And then we have quite a few buses for many of the other non-public schools also within the district and then outside of the district. So these are types of questions that we have. We also have the question of bus stop consolidation, where the bus presently might be stopping every so many 100 feet, or you might have stops, right in front of the house. The concept of consolidating buses is something that's being discussed very widely right now in school districts. As you know, in public transportation, the SEPTA bus doesn't necessarily come to your house. The SEPTA bus has a route, and you need to make your way to the place where the SEPTA bus is running. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have routes that'll be like the SEPTA buses, but I'm saying somewhere down the road it may come towards something like that. We may laugh about, remember back in the day when the bus used to come like right down my street? I'm not sure that we're always going to be able to have the level of buses coming so close to homes as we have today. But nonetheless, let's walk before we run here, and let's take a look at this concept of bus stop consolidation and ride time and shuttling students and sharing buses and that sort of thing. So the question is, and this one's a little more complex, so you need to really take some time and look at this. In order to cut operational expenses, would you support the consolidation of bus stops that would result in students walking an additional, and then you have choices. And you have none of the above as the final choice, saying, I really don't support any of these. So would you support having students walk an additional 1/10 of a mile? That's 528 feet. You say, I'm willing to go to 2/10 of a mile, but I won't go beyond that. That's a little over 1,000 feet. You say, you know what, 3/10 of a mile, that's not much at all in my mind. I'll go to 1,500 feet. You'll say 4/10 of a mile is really not an issue. I'll vote for 202,764 because I'm comfortable with 4/10 of a mile. Or you might vote for none of the above, saying, I really don't want to have any kind of consolidation of bus stops. I just want to try to keep the bus stops the way they are. So this one's a little more complex. I'd like you to give it thought and respond. Transportation is a big item. We are trying to really prioritize instructional items. So the support like energy and transportation are areas that we're putting more pressure on. But we need to have feedback from you about that and how you feel about the concept of bus stop consolidation. Now, bus stop consolidation does have the ability to shorten ride times because the bus doesn't have to come to a stop as frequently. So there could be an upside to that also because in addition to saving money, you can shorten your ride times also. But as you might imagine, every time you need to get that massive bus moving again after a stop, it takes energy, it takes fuel. I think I see a question back here.
Would you take into consideration the safety of the students and the age of the students?
Yes, the question is, would you take into consideration safety? Would you take into consideration age? Safety is extremely important to us, so we wouldn't have students walking along any kind of hazardous routes where it's not safe to walk or anything like that. The concept of bus stop consolidation is primarily in your neighborhoods where you have sidewalks and you have a development. of the various ages that we have in our community, or you're in the borough or somewhere like that where we have sidewalks and you have the ability to walk, or at least making sure that it's safe. Safety is, you can't compromise safety. You have to make sure you have a safe situation. So thank you for that question.
Dr. Dietrich, we have a question on the line in regards to transportation. It comes from Roger, and he asks if the routing supervisor position that was advertised, has that been filled? Is that person currently working on routes for the fall?
We did advertise for a routing supervisor. However, when we had the resignation of our transportation coordinator, we suspended the interviews on the routing supervisor and instead decided to advertise and search for a transportation coordinator that has routing experience. So we just started those interviews this week, and we'll be continuing those interviews next week. So the answer to that is no, we have not filled that routing supervisor position. That presently is vacant, and we're looking at the transportation coordinator position. I see two questions over here.
Isn't it true that the state does not mandate that transportation even be provided? In the light of the escalating pension catastrophe, which is now coming very quickly on us like a tsunami, it might be possible that all bus service will be eliminated and the students of the district will have to find their own way to get to the thing in order to pay the pensions.
Bus transportation is not a mandated service. You can choose not to transport. Now, when you decide to transport, you have to follow certain rules. But you can say, we don't do transportation. Transportation is something the district is not doing. It's up to the individuals to get their children to school or to use public transportation or whatever it might be. Sometimes you see some of the medium-sized cities don't offer bus transportation. The children either walk or they take public transportation. So it is not a mandated service to have transportation. But once you decide you're going to have transportation, then there are some rules that you have to abide by, including the transporting of non-public school students to any school within 10 miles of your border. Within 10 miles of your border. That's the law. So any school that's within 10 miles of your border, you must transport a child to that school. It doesn't matter where they live. It's not 10 miles from their house or 10 miles from some other. It's from a school that's 10 miles of your border. That's an eligible school. So anybody within your district can be transported to that school at no cost. That's the law.
This might be a more specific question. I know the consortium, I understand, is going away, but for the approved private schools for special ed students, is there any thought to keeping that part of it? So not to necessarily all the private schools, but like my daughter goes to Overbrook on a consortium van, and it's worked out better this year than it ever did with North Penn. No offense to North Penn.
Great question. We are still intending to approach other school districts as they are interested in working with us, and we are interested in working with them on a case-by-case basis. So despite the fact that we may not have a formal consortium, we still have all been of the same mind that we need to work together with neighboring districts on a case-by-case basis to see if it makes particular sense. So some of the smaller size schools, we have some schools where we only have one student or two students who go to that approved private school, for example, and special ed student's a good example. So we may only have a few students going to that school. The school may be, on the other side of Methacton. So I've had conversations with the superintendent of Methacton. Or the school may be somewhere on the other side of Wissahickon, where we actually are driving through those districts, to get to that particular school. And they have one student, and it makes sense for us to pick up that student along the way and then to bill them. And likewise, they may be coming into our district on their way to a school on the other side of our district, and it makes sense for them to pick up our student. So we still want to have those case-by-case relationships. Okay. I see two hands over here.
What routing program would be used to prevent an incident like last year, kids walking along Church Road without a sidewalk? I believe you used Edulog.
The routing software is a big challenge for school districts. Edulog is the routing software that we presently have. We are looking at other transportation software companies. In our opinion, there are some others that are very worthy alternatives. Anytime you transition to a new software, there's a steep learning curve there initially in order to achieve then the advantages of that upgraded software. So there's some vendors now that are really taking full advantage of GPS routing, building that into their software also. But the software is only as good as the information that's put into it also. So you need to really put in there all that information about hazardous routes, whether or not it's deemed to be safe or not. The state has a really fairly complex system there determining whether a route is hazardous or not. They do a full evaluation if we say we really need to have an evaluation on this route. They send somebody out. They do their own independent evaluation of the route, and they determine for us whether or not it's safe or hazardous. Likewise, a parent can request that also, where their parent says, look, I disagree with you, and I think that's a hazardous route. They can request then that the state can do an evaluation of that route. There was a question here.
Is there any thought put into making students pay for a transportation service provided by North Penn?
Okay, we have a concept here of having students pay a fee to have bus service. That's a concept I think we should explore. I honestly cannot answer you off the top of my head to know what the ramifications of that would be, if it's permissible or not, but it's a concept worth exploring. Could we say, if you want to ride the bus, it's going to be $300. If you don't want to ride the bus, get here by whatever means you get here. That's a concept, and we have people taking notes this evening, so thank you for that suggestion, but I don't know the answer to it.
I know I've always been told that it's the law that we have to transport private school students. I'm wondering, in light of the current economic climate, if it isn't time that public schools challenge that law. Secondly, I'm wondering if you can tell me a number of how much money the school district spends transporting private school students.
Okay, in terms of the law, certainly school districts have an ability to put pressure on legislators, but all of you do also. So if you think laws should be different, you elect those individuals. They are responsible to you. They have a full staff of individuals willing to accept your phone calls, read your letters, read your text messages or your emails. So I do encourage individuals, if they have opinions about laws, to contact legislators and share those opinions about them. But it also is important to us, as the school district, to be in contact. Last evening we did host a meeting with 3 of our state representatives, and we talked about a wide range of issues that are confronting schools right now, and they already are aware of it. We drove home the point about the need to have some flexibility and some mandates and things that are very costly to a school district. Bob, off the top of your head the answer to the question on, I could give you, but I feel better if I give it to Bob on this one.
Well, we spend about $14 million on transportation. That is nearly 14,000 students, 2,500 being non-public. The public school students are approximately $300, and the non-public, since they go 10 miles out of the boundaries, as much as 10 miles, they're about $600 a student.
Okay, the results on this one, we have 30% saying, you know what, a tenth of a mile is fine with me. Another 20% saying I could go to 2/10 of a mile and be comfortable with that. 18% saying 3/10 works for me. 16% saying 4/10 suits me just fine. And 16% saying I don't agree with any of those choices. Next question, in an effort to reduce transportation time and operational costs, would you support transporting public and non-public students on the same bus? So if you are living in a neighborhood and some of the children in that neighborhood attend a public school and some of the children in that neighborhood, your neighbor's kids, attend a non-public school, are you comfortable having students on the same bus in order to reduce time and cost? How do you feel about that one? I'm not seeing results come in. There's some hieroglyphics over there. One moment. We're just checking to make sure we're not having a technical difficulty on this one. I see some strange icons over there on the side of the question, and I'm not seeing the results come in here, so I may need to have my technical experts get on this one. I'm not sure what's happening, but usually by now I see results coming in there, Kyle. We love technology as long as it works. So it's going through. Everybody's not having a problem where it's rejecting your vote. You got an error message on yours, Tina? But yours went through, Frank?
No, mine went through.
I'm not sure what's happening on this one. Got some gremlins in the system here. We can, and we can come back to that one and figure out if we can get this one operational. Let's give this next one a shot, and then we'll see if we can come back to that previous one. This one says, in an effort to reduce non-public transportation time and operational costs, would you support a non-public transfer shuttle system where students would be bused to transfer points? There are districts that have this. Some of those that were in the consortium actually have a very well-defined transfer system. We are using this right now for LaSalle and Mount St. Joseph's, where we gather some students up and then they board a bus at Corpus Christi or at another location within the school district, and they head on off to their non-public destination from that point in time. So here the idea is that if you have a situation where you're going into a neighborhood and you have some students in that particular neighborhood that choose, Gwinnett Mercy, some other students, their families choose Mount St. Joseph's, you have some others who choose, Archbishop Wood, whatever it might be, you would gather them all initially on the same bus, but then you would divide at some point and then head off to those particular locations. All right. Okay, we have 80% of the individuals who are voting at this juncture saying they do support the shuttle system with the transfer points, and 20% saying not for me or my kids, or I don't support that idea. We did try one last time there to get that other question. Looks like we're not able to get that one. It may be possible those votes will actually come up for us later, or maybe tomorrow. It seems like for many of you the votes did go through, but if not, we'll figure that out. As I said earlier, this will also be on our website, so if you want to go back tomorrow or later this evening, is it up already now? I think it's up. You can get on and do that question directly on the website. And I think this is the last question, if I recall correctly. This one is, do you support first on, first off routing? That's where students are picked up first in the morning or also the ones dropped off first in the afternoon. If you have the longest bus ride in the morning because you're the first one on, in the afternoon you would have the shortest bus ride because you would be the first one off. Conversely, if you get on last in the morning and you have a very short bus ride on the way home, you may be the last one off then. Of course, it would be only in areas where it would make sense.
Dr. Dietrich, I was able to go online and find the real results of the question that we couldn't get the results for.
And now, for the real results, we have Mr.
Just to
Berger.
share with everybody, and that was the question in transporting public and non-public students on the same bus. And out of 51 responses, 35 were in favor, 16 were against.
So 35 of the responses. So percentage-wise, that might be, what do you say, 56?
Yeah, 60% or so. Yeah, 50,
Yeah,
55,
probably
60.
somewhere in there. Okay. Okay, on this one, about 80% say, you know what, I support first on, first off. 20% saying I do not support that. So I'm going to quickly go back here if I can, and I'll just see if there is anything else in terms of re-summarizing. Walk you through it all. Remember, in this one, we had 96% saying they supported limited advertising. This one, we had 100% saying they were fine with that type of ad. We had 33% saying they were comfortable with an ad that supported a particular, promoted a particular product. 67% said they were not. We had 88% saying this concept of advertising via paid promotional announcements at halftime, that sort of thing, was fine with them. The advertising on the website calendar had 81% approval rating on that one. The stadium fences, that sort of thing, 86% in favor of that. 65% said they would support the creation of a development position. 35% said they did not. 84% said, you know what, naming rights, sponsorship, those things are fine with me. 16% said they're not. Donating to the alumni fundraising, 55% said, you know what, if I'm a grad, I'm willing to donate some funds to that. 45% said, no, I'm not. And then we got into our transportation questions, and we saw the breakout there, and we just did that one more recently. And you can see where people came in on that one. That's the one we had Kyle report on there. Majority said, yes, they are okay with that. On this one, 80% said they're comfortable with the transfer system, and 80% on the first on, first off. So those are the results for those that participated. As I said earlier, we will have the opportunity, if you're viewing this through tape delay, to actually go on our website and vote accordingly at that point in time. Okay, additional questions. I think we're actually a little beyond what I thought it would be, but I'm enjoying this quite a bit, so I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap for the evening.
This slide that you have right here, is this different than your bus routes are currently, and is there a cost advantage to doing this?
Okay, is this different than what we're doing now? Is there a cost advantage? You want to just quickly, Tom Schneider's here. Tom's been helping us out in the bus garage right now in the absence of a coordinator of transportation. So quickly summarize this one.
There's really no cost advantage. What this does is it equalizes the travel time for students. In some cases where the students are traveling far from their home to the school, it would just equalize the travel time. So there's really no cost advantage. What we're trying to do with the transportation is to try and get all the bus runs and routes trying to be more equal than what they currently are. Some, for one school, may have a variance of maybe between 10 minutes and 30 minutes to get to an elementary school. We're trying to equalize that. And some of those longer runs, if we can work this out, it would be beneficial to the students.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions? I see a hand back there.
Has it ever been considered to stagger the starting and ending times of schools, like elementary, early, middle school in the middle, and high school?
The start time and end time, great question. We're actually looking at that and seeing if we can make some changes with the tiers. Presently, we have basically 3 tiers of busing. Buses are used at 3 different times. We have the high school being first, then we have our middle schools and the Bridle Path and Walton Farm elementary schools, and then the 3rd tier would be the other 11 elementary schools. However, when you look at the use of buses, it really takes the most buses in that 2nd tier and almost as many buses in the 3rd tier, not nearly as many buses during the 1st tier. So that's not a real efficient system because you have that investment of buses, but you're using approximately 53 buses for the high school, and you're up around 80 buses then for your 2nd and 3rd tier in rough numbers. So yes, that's a good question. We're looking at that. First, we have to equalize, as Mr. Schneider said, some of those run times and then perhaps we might be able to do something different with tiers.
The situation with the busing at the high school, many of the students have chosen to drive. They're only charged $50, but we're forced to provide a seat at every single day of the 183 days. I think that the parking could actually be raised to be $400 or $500, which would really reflect the price of the seat, which we're forced to carry in the district.
Okay. Here's a suggestion regarding that. We do have a differential on the parking passes right now. If you're willing to waive your transportation, there is a reduced fee for that. But I think the gist of the question, or the suggestion here, is to change the structure of the fees to increase fees that students pay in the parking lot. And Bill's talking about that concept. You know, we could come up with another poll question about that too. I mean, there are ways we can try to get some feedback on those kinds of things. If you have any opinions about that, please write to us, email us. We are taking input on the budget at budgetinput@npenn.org. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on that. So if you have ideas such as the one that Bill just talked about there, send them to us, budgetinput@npenn.org. Okay, Bob?
Next week, Wednesday night, the 18th, we're going to have the second innovation celebration. Last year, we had about 80 projects that were presented by different groups of staff and even students. And so this year, we expect an equal amount of participation. And we had some very interesting ideas, everything from minor things such as changing the font that we use to use less ink. We had a major explanation of the energy program, 80 different projects. We talked about how we were determining whether we could live with a vacancy or needed to replace that position. So that's next Wednesday night, 6 to 9 p.m. in the cafeteria at the high school.
All right, Dr. Dietrich, one more question coming online from coveritlive.com. Are the bus routes designed so that those that live closest to the school are picked up last and dropped off first?
Okay, so it's a question regarding a bus route design. That's really a complicated question. No really easy answer to that. The software actually gives you suggested routes in order to accomplish your bus routing in the most efficient manner. There are limitations, though. Anytime you have a computer do it, it has potential, but then you need to have an actual human individual look at that and say, is all of this still making sense? I think all of us have used the GPS system, and it said, you know, go this way, and you're like, oh, I don't want to go that way, and you choose a different route compared to the one that's being suggested. So, you know I've experienced that already where I'm familiar with the first part of the route. I'm not familiar with the second part of the route. So I substitute, my own experience for the first part of the route. So the way our routes are built right now, we do use software to do that, but we also have routers who override some of the suggestions that are made by the software. But as I said earlier, the software is getting more sophisticated now, and the hope is that we can tap into more sophistication in software so that we have a more pleasing product as the outcome. All right, I do thank you very much for attending this evening. I also thank you those of you that are watching it at home, online, or on the television and doing things through coveritlive.com. I will remain a few more minutes here afterwards if you have something you'd like to talk to me about. But thank you again for attending this evening. I appreciate it very much.